All right, so we are going to ask questions and you guys can take turns answering. And so first off, how long have you guys been knitting?
I'll start.
Okay,
Can
you
we
go
go
ahead.
back and have them introduce themselves?
We'll
How about we do that?
Absolutely not.
Tell me,
So
Yeah.
I'm
tell them
Marcy,
who you are. Yeah.
Marcy Vandale, the M in Adventure Du Jour Designs. Anyways, that didn't work. I started knitting in college. My parents sent me away to college, and they were very excited when I came home first semester and I had learned to knit.
And nothing else.
And well, there wasn't much more to talk about at that point. It was early. So that was 35 plus years ago. Debbie, what about you?
Oh, yeah, I'm Debbie Stone. My grandmother taught me to knit when I was about 7. And I kind of knit off and on throughout my childhood into college. And then I stopped when I got married and had kids. And then I picked it back up again when my kids were a little bit older. And yeah, so a long time, 50 plus years.
I like to say I became a knitter with a capital K when my kids were, my oldest were about 5. So that would have put me at 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Yeah.
And who taught you?
A girl on the hall had this little yarn shop right in her room. So my first project.
That's smart.
My first project was the Lopi sweater. She had the yarn, the patterns, the needles, everything. And we'd sit around at nighttime when, you get back up to the hall, we'd sit around Wheeler 4 and knit. And she'd answer questions. I knew nothing about gauge. I knew nothing about why I was doing anything. I knew how to knit and I knew how to do color work. And then I learned how to purl too. But that was it. My first sweater is like a suit of armor. I mean, it was solid. I just knit it as tight as I could. It was very consistent, but couldn't wear it.
My first project was a garter stitch headband. That's pretty much what it was. Lopi sweater? Really? A Lopi sweater? No, I don't have it. It was in squeaky acrylic, and my grandmother would cast on like 10 stitches on these plastic needles. I'd probably a size 7 or 8. And then she'd say, now just knit and just keep knitting until I tell you not to knit anymore. And so I'd get to the end and then she would take it off the needle and sew it together. I did not know how to cast on or bind off for like 4 years. She just cast it on and hand it to me. So lots of garter stitch headbands and scarves and that kind of stuff.
I still have those 2 sweaters I made that first semester. And the best thing was, one of them actually is a great sweater. The other one is a suit of armor. My kids, we had an ice storm about 10 years ago. And my kids were little then. So I'm like hunting around because we had no electricity, no heat. And I drug out all the sweaters, and didn't my son wear that suit of armor? He loved it. It was so warm.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was very funny. They loved the sweater.
So how did you two meet?
Online dating.
Yeah.
I mean,
Online dating for knitters.
Ravelry.
Ravelry.
You met on Ravelry?
We did.
You did?
Yeah, we met on Ravelry. We ended up at an event together and realized we were both going to be at the same event. And then after that, we ended up at another event together and went to dinner. And it was lunch, and lunch lasted into dinner, and we ordered another meal. And we realized then that maybe we liked each other. The waitress was like, you want your check? We're like, no, actually, we're going to see the menu one more time because now it's close to 6 and we're going to need to eat again. So
it was great. I mean, like, when you start talking to somebody and you just have somebody who completes your sentences and says like exactly how you feel. I mean, and we weren't holding back, and there was no pretenses, and it was just so normal. And oh gosh, me too. No, really? Me too. Oh, it was crazy how much alike we were, and we clicked.
So how many years ago do you think that was?
Oh, we know.
Okay. What is it?
What year was it?
13 years ago?
Years ago, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's right when Signature started.
See?
Oh, we know. We're well aware of that as well. We know about your anniversary. We buy
We know
everything
about
on
your
every
black
anniversary.
magic.
Oh yeah. That's right. Preaching to the choir.
There you go.
All right.
Don't sit on my needles. Yeah, so we became friends and then kept up our friendship over emails. And we did a lot at that point of FaceTiming, before FaceTiming was really much of a thing.
Skype.
Skype, that's right, we Skyped.
We Skyped.
Because FaceTime wasn't a
Skype
thing. That's why it wasn't a thing. We Skyped.
Right.
Because you live 3,000 miles apart, right?
Right. On opposite coasts.
Yep. Oregon is Debbi and I'm Massachusetts. We couldn't be further apart.
Well, we could. One of us would have to live in Hawaii.
And I could live in
And you'd have to live in the UK. And then
I could live in Maine.
You could.
Yeah. But then it'd be cold there all the time.
So how did you guys go from clicking and getting along so well to then saying, hey, we should design patterns together?
So during all these Skype sessions, we started designing our own things. And we'd sit on Skype and say, oh, so this is what I'm doing. And I don't know. Oh, I don't know. What about this though? I think it's going to be too tight. And she'd say, why don't you use a different needle size? And I'd be like, huh, why don't you use a different bind off? That's brilliant. And eventually
one thing led to another. And one day we were like, why aren't we doing this together? Like, what's wrong with us? Two heads are better than one.
It's like a perpetual knit night. You know, we are both knitting the same thing. Usually Debbie's twice the speed as I am. So she gets to rip things out faster than I do.
I do get to rip a lot.
But you know, we were both doing individual things and making our own progress, but it's so much easier to work with somebody that you have the utmost trust in and that doesn't keep score and keep count of things. And
way behind if we had to keep score.
I can't count, so I'm about good to 4. And it was not only helpful, but it was more fun. So, I mean, if life isn't fun, you gotta make it fun.
Yeah.
So that's what we started doing, and it works.
So I noticed you said, Debbi, you rip everything out. Marcy, do you, or do you just leave? Do you feel okay like letting it stay there, or do you rip out too?
Oh, I make her rip it out.
So yeah, so usually what happens is Debbie's like twice as far, and then she goes, oh, this isn't gonna work. And so she has to rip out to where I am.
Okay.
And then we do it. It's not always that way. I have to rip out too.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, designing is just knitting and unknitting. That's all it is. I'm going to knit anyway. So no, yeah. I don't leave my mistakes in.
Okay.
If I can help it.
Yeah.
That would bother me.
Yeah. Well, bother me.
How do you go about sharing information back and forth between you?
Oh, well, we use Dropbox. We use shared folders in Dropbox. So if one of us needs to make a change to something, we can, or if one of us is working on it, we're both knitting the pattern and we say, oh, this should be this instead of this, then either one of us can go into the share folder and make the changes, and the other person sees them in real time. So we share information that way. We do a lot of stuff on FaceTime, and we do a lot of stuff on the phone. I'm usually driving and she's usually at home taking notes. Thank God for that. Because one of us needs to write it down, and if I'm driving, that's not me. So that we kind of just, and we started using this product called the Rocket Book, which is a book that you can write in and then you can scan it. And so when we're taking notes, we'll do that. We'll write in our notes, or information that we have about whatever we're working on, and then we scan it into a shared folder that we have on Dropbox so that both of us can see the notes that we've written.
It's magic.
Usually
I
they're
seem to
Marcy's
recall-
notes.
I was just say, I seem to recall you mentioning that you have a text chain between you that goes back years and years
Oh.
and years.
We don't, we never, I would have a real problem if I couldn't get on that text thread, because there's stuff in that text thread that it's a long text thread. It's longer than the one that I have with my family.
I'm up to 256 gigabytes on my telephone.
It's all me. It's all me.
It's a lot of you.
Yeah, we
I
do a
delete
lot.
everything else, but it's amazing how much, like, I'll just say, ignore this, and then I'll write notes. And she'll be like,
Okay.
what was that? I'm like, oh, that was the row I had to rewrite, but I just had to
Don't worry
text
about it.
someone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, with the time change, it really, it's funny how much 3 hours really is different in somebody's day.
Oh my goodness.
You know,
Like, I'm not getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to talk to her, and she's not staying up till 1. It's just not, you know.
although sometimes that happens.
Well, that's usually when I'm at your house. So.
That's true.
Do
But
guys-
you know, it's, you know, Debbie's finished her workout and it's 10 o'clock, and, you know, I'm halfway through my day and trying to figure out what I'm going to do for dinner, and I'm starving and it's lunchtime, and, you know, trying to juggle. So we actually use this app called Calendar, and we schedule things.
And you
so
know,
that
in the fall time, or late summer, early fall, we set a business meeting every week, and we FaceTime, and that's on our calendar, and we FaceTime during that business meeting, and we discuss whatever it is we need to do, make the to-do list, assign the things. Marcy writes it down because I can't be trusted. And then that's how we kind of assign the chores and the tasks for the rest of the week or whatever. If we didn't do that, we would be more crazy than we are, and we would miss a lot of stuff, because this way at least it keeps us both kind of on track as much as we can be.
it's actually unbelievable when you have a to-do list and you have a deadline and somebody holds you to it, how much you get done.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Well, and
rock
you
stars.
treat it like the business that it is also.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, and the other nice thing is Debbie and I do this because we want to. So
Yeah, let's be honest. Nobody's paying their mortgage with the pattern sales that we have. I mean, it's just, that's just the reality of it with most people that are doing this, not making a huge amount of money. We do it because we love it. And when we get to a point where we don't love it or we're not feeling it, then we take a little bit of a break. There's been times when Marcy's had issues. She broke her wrist and couldn't knit for a while. So I did a lot of stuff. I had some issues with my daughter, had a premature baby, and I had to do a bunch of stuff with her. So Marcy took over for me. It's really nice because we can just seamlessly share, you know, what we need to do. And the other person just comes in and says, you know, I got this. I'll take it. I can do this. And it's so nice to have a partnership with someone that there's never, like she said, there's never any keeping score. Like, well, I did that last time, so this time it's your turn. We just work very cooperatively together, and we're lucky that we do.
it's awesome. I mean, aside from my husband, who I'm married to legally, you know, I consider Debbie my closest person. She's my person.
Yep, ditto. All right, that's enough of that.
It works. It's fun. We like to have fun too, by the way.
Well, you two are hilarious together. You really are.
You can't have anything else. You need to keep your sense of humor. That's what I say.
So
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
If you can't laugh.
So what was the most popular design you guys have ever created? What's the thing that took off, or maybe you weren't expecting to and did?
Do you want to say it with me, Marcy?
Sure.
1, 2, 3.
Toolbox.
Box. So it's a, in fact, I have one here. What did I do with it? Oh, it's right here. So it's a slip stitch pattern, and you can use scraps, you can use mini skeins, which everybody loves. You can do it in a gradient, and we designed it when we were at a retreat together, and we had taken a class, and we came out of the retreat and decided that we were both kind of talking back and forth about what we could do with the stuff we had learned in this class. And we immediately were like, oh, we could do this, this, and this. And the
class was color theory.
And it was called the woman that was teaching it called it having your knitter's toolbox, and all the tools in your toolbox, not necessarily your needles, but the tools that you use in your toolbox. And so we were like, maybe we should call it toolbox. So we designed the cowl, and then from there, it was just a natural progression to a hat and mitts. And so these are actually the mitts. Oops. So those are the mitts.
Those are cool.
Oh,
yeah. And then we have a hat that goes with it. So we like to, if we get a theme for something like that, we like to interpret it into another part of, something else that you can do with it. Not always, but a lot of times with a cowl or with a hat, we will say, oh, well, what if we did it in a cowl, or what if we did this in mitts? So we've got several collections that we've done that with. But toolbox is by far our most popular, most knit design that we've ever done. And it's probably one of the simplest that we've ever done, but that's the beauty of it. The people like simplicity, and they don't like to have to think about it. And it's pretty easy.
And there are so many beautiful,
yeah.
There are so many beautiful yarns out there. And what we decided is we need to do something to let the yarn work together and the color work together, but also the yarn to work by itself and show the beauty of it. I mean, all these hand-painted yarns are gorgeous. So we allowed for some of that in the design as well. And people have really had fun creating their own impression and their own interpretation of their own toolbox. If you go on Ravelry and look at all the different projects, they're really neat.
It's really cool to see all the different projects because everybody's interpretation of it is different.
Wow. Yeah. By the way, to all the people who are watching, if you have questions, you can type them into the chat, and we will get them answered as we go.
Yeah. So you guys do get along really, really well, and I think you explained that great. But what happens if one of you does something, design something, not so much personality-wise, but design something, and the other one's like, oh gosh, no. Do you ever had that, or is that not really something that you do have?
We don't. I don't think we ever really have had that. We had a design that, it was funny because, and Marcy probably won't know, maybe you'll know what I'm talking about. But we had this design we were working on, and we were knitting it, and we were like, yeah, this is kind of cool. And we just kept knitting it, and we both got done with it, and we're like, so now we need to kind of try to style it. So we're trying to style it. And then we were both like, I don't know if I'm really feeling them. Marcy's like, I hate this thing. And I'm like, I do too. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said something, because most of the time we agree on practically everything we do. We will go back and forth and say, I'll say, well, what if we did this bind off? And Marcy will say, well, but what about this? And what if we did this instead? And we're like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, we're really agreeable, and we don't really necessarily just acquiesce to the other person, because we both have pretty strong personalities, but we're so much alike in the things that we like. And the pieces that we've knit that aren't ours, we have a lot of pieces that are the same, that are other designers that both of us have knit, because we have the same aesthetic when it comes to things that we like. So we're just, I don't know. Am I wrong, Marcy? Do you hate everything?
No, I mean, we've never had a disagreement or a fight. I mean, a lot of people and partners have fights, but we've never had one.
No. I had a meltdown one time over a design, and I said, I can't talk anymore right now. I have to go. But it had nothing to do with her. It had to do with me. So that was But other than that,
But,
no.
and I will say, and I think I know which one you're talking about, but that was a unique experience. Normally what Debbie and I do is we knit the same things together at the same time. And because of the time constraint and the contract we were under, we got the yarn late, and the designer we worked with only sent one of us one yarn and one of us the other yarn.
And we had two different designs we were working on. So Marcy was knitting one and I was knitting the other. And that's where it came down to us being able to say, what do you think about this? I couldn't say that to her because she wasn't knitting what I was knitting. And she couldn't say it to me.
What do you think about, what if you look at it this way? Is it that, show me closer. And
that was the one time when I felt like, I feel like I'm in this all alone. Like, and not that she wasn't trying to support me, but she didn't have the yarn and the needles in her hand. And so she had no idea what I was faced with other than me saying, what do you think of this? Does this look right? Yeah.
And the funny thing is we've never had this conversation about that. And I knew exactly what she was talking about.
Yeah.
And the other design that we both didn't end up liking, it was really a sin because it was such nice yarn.
Beautiful yarn. Beautiful yarn.
And we'll do something.
We just have to tear it out and steam it. And yeah, but I mean,
See, we're not above tearing things out, especially yarn.
Oh no.
But we like the same things and it works.
So do you think,
the other thing is I'm not afraid if Debbie tells me she doesn't like something or maybe thinks that something could be done different. I don't take offense to that.
Me neither.
Like,
I always know there's something I can learn. Always.
We're out there taking classes.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth had a question that she's not familiar with all of your designs and is wondering if you design for a particular target audience or do you design for a variety of ages? Like, how do you choose what you design? Do you design for each other? Or do you like have something in mind that you're trying to, go toward?
All right. 1, 2, 3. We'll answer it together.
I can't because I don't know what you're going to say.
Okay.
For the one time in my life, I don't know what you're going to say.
We design
for ourselves.
We know what we like and we know what's sort of missing out there and we know what we want to wear. Mm-hmm. And we say, if this fits our wardrobe and if this fits our aesthetic, I think this is going to work for a lot of people. Let's do it. And
we try to have things that are approachable by everybody. And because of that, we like to use yarns that are interesting, and maybe the shapes and the designs are not as intricate as they could be or are with other designers. But like Marcy said before, we like to sometimes let the yarn do the talking. And if you try to get in the way of that, then you just get a mess. So we design for the things that we like or what's missing out of our wardrobe.
So would you say you go on trends or not as much, more classic designs or?
Well, kind of both, but we do follow trends. We follow social media. We look at some of the higher end designer things that are going on. We don't like stalk the runway or anything like that. We're not that, because we're not those kinds of people. Like, that's not what we would wear. So
we're basic.
We're pretty basic. So we like to have basic things that can go with a lot of different things in our wardrobe.
So do you also design separately as well as together?
Not anymore.
Well, we do, but not very much because this really takes up a lot of our time and it's more fun to do it this way. I've had a couple of things that I've designed singularly for our yarn crawl in Portland, and that's just because one of the yarn shop owners is a good friend of, and is actually in our knitting group, and she's asked me, would you do you want to do this, do you want to do that? And so that's really about the only thing that I've done is when somebody like that asks me. Most of the time it's together.
And the other thing is we want to set ourselves up for success, not failure. So we still live our lives. And if we overcommit, which we found we were a few years back, maybe doing a lot and maybe we needed to scale it back, we're blessed in that we have some you know, good relationships, and we can pick and choose. And if we say, hey, this is what we have, you're going to like this, they'll listen. And it just works out nice. But, you know, mostly it's under our own label.
Yeah. Because like I said before, it's so much easier to bounce it off another person that is doing the same thing that you're doing. And they can say, oh yeah, that knit two together doesn't work there. We need to figure out another decrease for that. Because that looks like crap. So let's do something different. And two brains, she's going to come up with stuff that I'm not thinking about, and I'm going to come up with stuff that she's not. And that's what makes our friendship and our designing stuff work really well.
So you guys said you guys are still taking classes. Is there anything that you haven't learned yet, or that it's on your like bucket list of knitting to do or to learn?
Well, we did take a class in this one thing, but we both were failures at it.
Total and complete. And it had nothing to do with the fact that we had been overserved the night before.
No, it was at a retreat and we were being very responsible during the day. But neither one of us have ever really mastered brioche. And we're both fascinated by it, especially like the lace brioche and all of that stuff. But every time I look at it, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's like another language. But I guess it's the same thing as when you start doing cables from a chart and you think, I'll never be able to do this. I'll never be able to read a chart. And then you start doing it and you're like, oh, well, that's not so hard. So I'm sure if we'd actually paid attention in the class, we would have probably learned how to do the brioche thing.
Well, I mean, the other thing is with anything, you need practice, and something like brioche is requiring a considerable amount of concentration. And I don't normally have 7 people in my house, but I do right now. And, you know, I still have 1 kid at home in a normal life. And Debbie, I mean, you've got your husband and you've got the grandkids. And so we need to have some like concentrated time, and that just hasn't happened to master such a big area of knowledge.
Well, and not only that, we have a tendency to fill our time with knitting the things that we're designing. So we've just recently, with this COVID thing, both of us have just recently started doing some selfish knitting. Like we both knit a Love Note sweater. I can't tell you the last time I knit a sweater that wasn't one of our designs. And by the end of it, you're like, yeah, I really like this. I don't want to wear it because I've been working on it and taking pictures of it and making the pattern of it and blah, 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 and promoting it. And I'm just like, But we each got to knit a sweater that was like cleansing your palette, because then after that, it was like, oh, now I want to knit all this other stuff.
Yeah, the only problem was it was 100 degrees here almost, and I couldn't wear it. I can't wait to wear the thing. I'm in love with it. I'm going to turn my lights on. It's dark here now.
Turn your lights on. Yeah. So
we're going to talk needles now, because I feel like we have to talk needles a little bit. What are your guys' favorite needles, and do you have a particular size you tend to gravitate to, you know, when you're knitting?
Signature.
Okay.
Oh, you wanted the size?
Well, the size, or do you use circulars, DPNs?
Circulars and DPNs, depending
Signature circulars.
Signature circulars mainly.
Depends if we need to.
Yeah.
Oh wait, you wanted a number?
Yeah,
it's just all.
I think we gravitate towards like the mid-range for DK, like the 5, 6, 7, maybe an 8. But you know, we like the mid-range. We really like to knit on DK weight yarn. Okay. Both of us do, and so yeah, but signature and for sure circulars, and like I said, sometimes DPNs, depending on what the thing is that we're doing.
So the other interesting thing though, when we're knitting and designing, we always do gauge swatches, and we always need to use the same needle, because sometimes if you knit with different kinds of needles, it's different for your gauge.
Well, Yeah, so we'll say, okay, we're gonna cast this on size 6. You're using your signatures, right? Yes. Okay, cast on this many stitches so that we can do the gauge swatch so that we're both working on the same kind of tool at the same
And you
time.
know that the size of the needle will actually be identical between you.
Yes, that's what we do.
Yeah.
We have
Wow.
other needles, we just don't use them.
We don't. And that's not blowing smoke. I mean, you know what? I was talking to a group of people at a guild not too long ago, and somebody said, well, you know, what kind of needles do you use? And I said, I use signature needles. And they're like, oh, they're so expensive. And I'm like, hey, if you're a marathon runner, are you putting kids on your feet, or are you putting on the most expensive shoes that you can put on your feet to get you to the end of the marathon? And they're like, oh. And I said, these are your tools. It's like putting really crappy tires on your car and expecting to drive up the mountain in snow. Why would you do that? So,
I use a golfing metaphor. Oh, I couldn't spend that much. What kind of golf clubs does your husband have?
there's that. There is that. Yeah.
Of course, I'm a golfer too, or I was a golfer. But you know, your tools matter.
They really do.
Mm-hmm.
You're only as good as your tools. In your kitchen, do you have the silverware that bends when you scoop the ice cream?
Well, I have an ice cream scoop, but you know.
Well, you know.
I mean, yeah, I know what you mean.
Right tool for the, yep.
The right tool for the right job. Yes. Yeah.
Well, and Debbie, I think I don't know what year this was, but I met you. I think it was at Stitches West. And I was working on one of your, I don't think it's a shared pattern, right? Spectral?
No.
Is that just you, or is that you?
That's just me.
That's just yours. And I was, I think a newer knitter, but I was struggling with one of the features of it. And someone said, oh, and I think I was at the booth, and somebody said, oh, Debbie's here. She can show you. I thought, oh, wait. So there was having this moment of like, oh, I get to meet Debbie Stone. What?
Oh boy.
And you came over, and in like 15 seconds you explained it. I'm like, oh, yep, I get where you're going. That makes sense. But you have had, you know, and it's a pattern I've made so many times. Are you?
That's
did
funny
you say
because
you're
I'm
knitting
knitting
that
one right now.
Oh,
I'm working on one right now.
I
Yeah.
brought mine.
What
I
yarn
brought
is
mine. This is,
Oh yeah.
look at that pattern. Isn't that pretty?
Isn't that fun? It's really fun.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's
It's really
I
fun.
only have 2 of them.
Every time I've knit this, I've given it away. I had to call someone to get it back. So I need to make one for myself, I think.
Yeah, you do.
Pattern.
It's a fun pattern because it's so mindless. It really is. But you look like a genius when you're done. I like to let the yarn do the work.
It's
so.
pretty great. Well, and speaking of that, we have a question from Linda. She said one of her biggest frustrations is variegated yarn. She says she gets sucked into the pretty skein only to be disappointed in the resulting pooling. Do you have any designs that will bring out the best in those variegated yarns? And if so, what's the secret to doing with this kind of yarn?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Variegated. Well, I mean, the one thing you can do is break it up with something else.
I'm going to pull something out here.
Yeah, you do that.
As an illustration.
Yeah. So there's a variegated yarn and a semi-solid knit together. A lot of times what happens is people take a variegated yarn, they put it on their needles and they think, I'm going to make myself a cowl and I'm going to do this lace pattern. And then they knit it and they can't see the pattern because the variegated yarn has swallowed up the stitch pattern. So a lot of times if you take a variegated yarn and you dummy it down with just plain old stockinette or garter and work it even with some other yarn with it in a stripe or, you know, like color blocking, it's going to make the yarn work better. Now, as far as pooling and that kind of stuff, that's a function of your gauge and how many stitches you have on the needle. So if you're pooling like in a sock and you don't like it, it's because of the gauge and how many stitches you have. It's going to it's a function of math. It's all comes back to math. So if you don't like it, maybe you change the needle size or change the stitch count, and you won't see as much of the pooling, but they're inherent to pooling. They just are, the way that they're dyed. A lot of the hand dyeds are.
Sometimes the other thing you could do is knit from the outside of the ball and the inside of the ball.
Yeah.
So that you're breaking up where you are in the skein. Of course, bad luck might be that you might be in the same spot.
Right.
But that's another way to temper it a little bit. So you could break it up.
Yeah, you could wind 2 balls and start at a different spot with each ball. If you're doing something in the round, you could wind, take them and divide them in half and start with the first round out of ball 1 and the second round out of ball 2. As long as they start at a different place in the repeat, then you're not going to get that pooling. You're going to get more of a speckly look, planned speckles, I guess, than just the plain flashing or pooling.
We have a question. Can you describe what pooling is or what it looks like?
It's when you're knitting something, especially in stockinette, that's where it shows up the most. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marcy, but that's where, that's pooling,
there we
right?
go.
Thank you, Linda.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Linda.
Yes, thank you.
So it's where the colors line up with the color in the row below, and it pools into a section of knitting that's just that color.
It looks a little bit like tie-dye, Linda.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, see, on that example, you've got a smaller stitch count at the top. So it's really condensing what you've got for working your way around in that skein. Whereas as you work down that, it's more stitches and it has a chance to really use the entire skein.
Yeah, so see how
Oh.
See how there's big sections at the top where the hem is, and there's smaller sections of the color at the bottom? It's because the stitch count is changing.
Well,
so you have more stitches. What? Yeah, she's knitting from the top down.
Yeah, I'm almost looking, those look to be 2 identical pieces.
Oh yeah, no, they're not.
They're not
different colors.
Jennifer, can we unmute?
Unmute her. Yes.
There we go. We'll bring Linda in here.
Okay, so they're for my granddaughters, and they're one's 18-month. This is the 18-month. This is the
different stitch count.
2 years.
Yeah.
So they're one size difference. But look at how
different stitch count. But look how different that yarn. Well, even hold up that other one, Linda. The first one that you held up. Hold up the other one. Look at the difference between the top of that, where it's pooling, the big pooling of blue and peach and green, and then as she gets bigger stitch count, look how wider that pooling becomes.
Yeah.
It's a function of your gauge and the stitch count that you have.
Yep.
On this, it turned out cute, but on if I'm making a sweater for myself, I detest it.
What you can do is work from 2 balls.
Yeah.
And wind one way and one the other, and then every couple of rows change to a different ball of yarn. And
I will try that, because the other thing I've done is I've instead of knitting in the round, I have, after a couple rows under the pits, I will split the seams so I can knit back and forth.
Which will change it completely.
Yeah.
Interrupt the pooling. Yes.
Right. Yep. Yep.
Good.
All sorts of little tricks. But having said that, both of those pieces are going to be really cute on those little kids.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of that and the yarn, you mentioned that you guys kind of like working on DK. Do you find that is challenging right now because everybody's knitting on fingering weight? Fingering weight is, not everybody, but there's a large proponent. Almost all of the pretty yarn you see, a lot of it is on fingering. Are you finding that is challenging at all, or not really?
Well, so here's what we did. So, because we're lazy. So this is the one of the new ones that we have coming out. It's called Kite String, and Kite Tail.
Kite Tails.
Kite Tails. And so this is a DK.
Okay.
Okay. This is exactly the same thing. in a fingering held double.
Oh, okay.
So exactly the same. It's the same animal. And this is the same thing. If anybody out there has Zauberball in their stash, I'm here to tell you.
Ooh.
So this is Zauberball held double.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
So we can use the fingering yarn that everybody wants to knit with, or everybody has in their stash.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these things are just a single skein. So you need a single skein of 400 to 430 yards of fingering weight, and you can make a one skein project that's not gigantic or knitting on tiny little needles. Like this is on a size 7.
Okay.
Can you describe what held double is?
Yeah, it's when you take the yarn and hold 2 strands together and knit with them simultaneously. So you would wind the ball.
2 skeins of yarn?
You can, well, this is only 1 skein, and what we did with this is you wind it into a cake, and then you pull from the inside and the outside, and you hold those together, and you cast those on together and knit with them. So there's 2 strands, one coming from the outside of the ball, one coming from the inside of the ball, which also takes care of the pooling. Yeah.
So now,
and we're fickle. I mean, we knit with all of it. We were on a JAG last winter, and we did a lot of fingering. We have a shawl that's coming out soon too. Mind Your Step. That's fingering and mohair striped.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you know, we are easily distracted.
And you know, we're lucky because a lot of these yarn dyers are dyeing the same color ranges across a lot of their different bases. So mohair fingering, you know, like a single DK worsted, you can get the same color across all of those different weights of yarn. So that the world is really your oyster. If you wanted to work with a fingering and a mohair, you can. If you wanted to work with, you know, a DK and a fingering, you can. We're really lucky that they're doing it across all the bases.
Shameless plug. I think you guys are releasing Sullivan Street with Dirty Water.
Yeah, it's on our website right now, but the release is this weekend.
Okay, so advance notice. So that's the mohair, and I think that's the DK though.
DK.
It is.
But again, you know, the 2 bases together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, the thing that I really like about working with 2 bases is you get to see the variations in the dyeing. How the yarn takes the same dye is always a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been fascinated by sort of the science behind not only the dyeing, but the fibers. Way back when Clara Parks came out with her book, The Book of Wool, I couldn't get enough of it. I was fascinated. And in that stage of my life, I was felting a lot, and I would felt different yarns and, you know, really kind of study the fibers. And my kids were at the age where they thought science was cool and microscopes were neat. So one of them got a microscope at Christmas, and I started looking at all the fibers under the microscope for the different yarns. Yeah, I'm a nerd.
We have a question for you, Marcy. The pattern that you had the variegated yarn and the solid together, what is that pattern?
That's called Paper Kite. So we have a kite series coming out. So that's the one that I just showed you, Kite Tail, the little one, the Kite Tails one. So that's this. And then the Paper Kite is a sport weight, and it's
or DK
yardage, and yeah, sport weight or DK. And so yeah, so she's got, these are both the same. Like this one is Spin Cycle sport weight. And then we have one that we really have a fondness for Miss Babs. We love her yarn. We love her. We've been working with Babs for a long time, and she's very, very generous in supporting us. And every time we get a bump in our Ravelry sales, we're like, oh, we should look and see what Babs's newsletter is, and there'll be one of our patterns in there, and she's just that way. But anyway, this is the same thing. This is Paper Kite in Miss Babs, and this is kind of 2 different colors, a semi-solid and a speckle. So same kind of thing, just kind of an exploded version of the kite tails.
Debbie, do you want to tell
My
them the
spectral
the two
Yeah,
patterns?
that spectral is from Miss Babs as well. Yeah.
Debbie, do you want to mention the special thing about those two patterns?
Oh, right now we're doing a buy one, get one free. So if you go to Ravelry, you can buy both of those for the price of one. We just released them today. So
There's a coupon code that we're going to give you too.
Yeah.
If I can find it.
Marcy's in charge of that stuff. They don't trust me with that.
I believe I entitled it
Fly a kite.
Fly a Kite. So if you put both of those, paper kite and kite strings, in your box to purchase,
you'll get one of them free.
Fly a Kite, you get one free.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I'm going to just double check that now that on the new Ravelry, I can actually find where they hit it.
Gotta look. Gotta look. Again, there's a reason why she is in charge of that and not me.
Fly a Kite, all one word, FLYAKITE, through the weekend.
Yep.
Fly a Kite.
Sunday.
I'll make sure and post about that as well so that you guys
Sure.
can get,
Great.
and that'll end on Sunday?
Yep. Sunday midnight, my time.
Okay.
Or whatever Ravelry time is.
Oh my, do we know? Is that its own time?
Maybe. Who knows?
I don't know. I try, Debbie and I had this whole conversation, Debbie, I, and Alexa, about what actually it is right now. Is it PTSD,
Pacific Standard Time, Pacific Daylight Time.
and then there's no
PTSD.
clause for that, because I'm East Coast, she's West Coast, so
We
it's
have to
just
do the math a lot.
yeah. I don't know what it is. It's whatever Ravelry deemed it, and if you didn't get it, just let us know and we'll give it to you.
Yeah.
We're not really like that. It's all good.
Yeah.
And we're busting on Ravelry, but we love Ravelry. It's how we met.
Yeah.
And you guys
Online
can
dating.
you can always go back to the classic view. If the pastel world is not for you, you can go back to the classic.
I know. I'm back to the classic because that's how I roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that's a whole nother conversation.
Right, it is.
And I have been doing a lot this week on Ravelry, and I really gave the new one the good college try. I'm like, I am going to do this. This is the new world.
We're back to classic. Both of us are. It's okay. It's not for the new one's
But everybody has to rebrand and do their things, and I understand it. But even so, like, even if you go back to the classic, it's actually not the classic.
Right. There's some changes.
Yeah. So it's just going to take some people. Fortunately, I didn't have any health concerns, and Debbie didn't either. And
No.
it's just going to be, that's a medical condition. It's just going to take some getting used to and the tweaking. And I think the real thing for me is, I don't want to admit it, but I'm getting older and I don't see as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a fan of white space. So white space to me is you can make it bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. I need things to be bigger. So anyway, enough about
That's why I like the iPads. Make everything bigger. My kids are like, Mom, why do you always zoom in on our Instagrams? I'm like, so I can see it.
So my last question is kind of just a fun question, because everybody always wants to know what the most unusual place you've done something in. So mine is, what is the most unusual place you've taken your knitting? Like, have you knit concert, or where's it been?
The Today Show.
The Today Show. We've been on the Today Show a couple times, and actually we actually took our knitting inside Studio 1A and stood behind the desk with it.
Did you knit while you were on TV?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've given gifts to the name somebody on the Today Show. We've knit them things.
Goldie.
Yeah, Carson Daly's new baby. She has a sweater from us. Yeah, we've knit for Hoda. We've knit for Savannah. We've knit for Dylan. We've knit for Jenna.
The couple of producers.
Yeah, a couple of the producers.
How did that
Behind
happen?
the scenes guys are really fun.
Well, how did it happen, Laura? I don't know if you've met us, but we're kind of pushy. And so over the years, we've actually come to know some people that work there, and we're shameless. We just, all they can say is no. So we've asked, and we've been able to meet people, and yeah, so.
The first year we did it, though, there's somebody who doesn't work there any longer, noticed that we were standing there. I mean, you have to get up at the crack of dawn. It is dark out in New York City.
Dark.
When you have to go get in line. So we got our spots and we were there. And what do knitters do? We are nothing if not very excellent waiters. So we waited
and knit
with our coffee and our knitting. And people were like, "You're doing something." And we're like, "Yeah, of course we are."
Yeah, we're not idiots.
It caught their eye, and the anchors came over and talked to us and, interviewed us. I mean, Al said, "What are you knitting?" "Oh my gosh, what are you?" "Al, we'll bring you a hat." So the next
Well, actually, what I said to Al was, "Al, if we had known we were going to meet you, we would have knitted you a tie." And he says, "A tie? Have you seen my head? I need a hat." So we knit him a hat the next year because now we have an in with Al Roker. Not that he remembered us, but we did knit him a hat.
I'll tell you who did remember us this year, though. Hoda.
We knit a sweater for Hoda's first little girl when she adopted her first one, and there was a concert that day on the plaza, and the producer said, "Oh, we had a hat for him," but then we said, "We have this sweater for Hoda. We know that she's busy with the concert." And he looked at the sweater and he's like, "Oh no, I'm not going to take this. She's going to want to come over here and talk to you guys." So she left the stage, came over. We spent like 10 minutes with her. She was so touched. And then we made another sweater this year for her new little one. And so when we got there and gave her that sweater along with the one we did for Carson, and we did one for Dylan, and we did one for Jenna's little baby, she's like, "Oh, it's you guys, like you're back with another sweater." And we're like a bad rash, here we are. Here we are one more time.
Yep. So do you go every year now?
Well, let's see what this year's going to bring. But yes, we have been there every year.
We went twice one year.
Oh, wow.
No, so we've worked out this pretty good thing where I am fortunate enough to have a friend who has a little more flexibility and travels and doesn't mind coming to my house for a staycation.
I don't have kids at home. Just
Debbi comes. We have 2 wild weekends sandwiched with a week of staycation for me. And my husband, of course, works in New York City. So he's not home during the week. So it's kind of like, camp, an extra set of hands to help get things done. And now that there's only one kid at home, it's really kind of fun.
It's pretty easy.
And we just
do a lot of designing during that week too. We do a lot of things where we hash out things because we're there together, and it's 2 weeks, and we're there even if we're in the car doing something, but we're physically together, which doesn't happen very often. It may be once or twice a year.
And by we being in the car, it means usually I'm driving and Debbie's weaving in my ends.
Yes, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Usually for a sweater that's going to the Today Show, but let's not talk about that.
Yeah. And then for the first year, last year, I got really smart, and we usually go to Stitches West and work. And I took a little bit of a early flight and went out and stayed a few extra days out in Oregon. And then we went down to Stitches. So we got 2 really solid.
Yeah, it was nice. We don't see each other nearly enough. The only flaw in our friendship is that we live too far apart.
Yeah.
But we're working on that. We've got a plan. So.
Oh, that's interesting.
We just have to there's just some people we need to get rid of, and then we'll be okay.
We'll let you know. And it might be years down the road.
Probably.
But the other nice thing is that both of our husbands like to fish, and someday they're going to meet each other.
And fish together.
Well, that sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
That's fun.
It'll be like my husband's birthday present. Honey, look, I got you a fishing trip. Yeah, it's to
We're going to Oregon.
Yeah, we're going to stay at a fancy hotel in Hillsboro. It's a bed and breakfast.
Not so much the breakfast. Coffee, yes.
So yeah, it's been great. And you know, we're really fortunate to have been able to establish such a nice relationship with you guys too. We love going to Stitches, not only to spend time together and pretend we're working, but to, you know, network and meet other people. And we especially love seeing you guys every year.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, we love seeing you too.
Yeah. Well, we really appreciate you guys doing this with us.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a great Friday night cocktail party.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's right. We brought together knitting and a little bit of fun too. So that's
Yeah,
great.
thanks for having us, guys. This was great.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a
Thanks,
good evening. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.